Okay. Well, I think people are a little slow joining, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We're about halfway through. This is week 4 of our bell hooks class. It's great to see everybody. And we have a lot to get through today. We are wrapping up all about love, and not wrapping up all about love, but at least wrapping up the book all about love. But it's going to be foundational to everything that we do as we move forward. And as we do with each gathering, we want to begin by grounding ourselves. And so I'm going to, wrong thing. I'm going to ask folks, as we have in the last week, or did last week, I'm gonna, there we go. I'm gonna ask folks to start us with our land, labor, and life acknowledgement. Today, as we move in, we're going to be talking about love and intentionality. That's the piece of the book that jumped out most for me in this set of readings. And so we'll talk about love and intentionality, but also as a disruptor, as an intentional disruptor to rugged individualism, which really is at the core of white supremacist, patriarchal, heteronormative capitalism. They rely on individualism. But love requires communion, communality, the idea that coming together and healthy interdependency is a path towards revolution. And so we'll talk about that, focus on that today. But before we begin, as we do each of our classes, we're going to start with our land, labor, and life acknowledgement. And again, everything in this class is completely optional. You don't have to be here. You don't have to participate in parts of it that make you uncomfortable. Do what works best for you and helps you in your growth. And so we're going to begin with our land, labor, and life acknowledgement. And for those of you who would like to and are able, I invite you to sit in a comfortable position where you can get as much oxygen into your lungs as possible. And if it's comfortable for you, put your feet on the ground, put your hands in your lap and place them palms up. And if you can, and if you're inclined, take a deep breath in. And breathe out. And is there someone who can read that first slide? Someone who can read that first slide? You can just unmute and begin.
Hello. This land that we inhabit is physically situated in the original ancestral homelands of the Tongva people. We pay respect to the Tongva and all indigenous people, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence in the homeland and throughout their historical diaspora.
Thank you. Let's take another deep breath in. And breathe out. Can anyone read this next slide?
We pay homage to those who were stolen from Africa, placed in bondage, falsely named as chattel, and forced into labor, who were called slaves but never submitted to such, who have always been fully human with an unbroken connection to the divine and to each other. We honor the African ancestors for the still unpaid labor which built what is now the Americas.
Thank you. Let's all take another deep breath in. And breathe out. And who can read this last slide?
To both our Indigenous and African forebears, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation and reparations, for it is only through freedom and justice that we truly give honor. Ashe.
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 So again, welcome everybody. And we are now in week 4. And we're coming to know each other a bit. And there may still be new folks who are joining. So if you are new and haven't yet introduced yourself to this community, please raise your hand so that you can introduce yourself. Yes, Miss Italy. Hi, I'm so glad you can make it.
I know, me too. Hi, you guys. Hi, family. I miss Italy. Pleasure meeting you guys.
And do you want to say what brought you to this class? What brought you to this class?
Can I be candid?
Please do.
Okay. I just been sick and tired of being dumbed down and misinformed about my people and myself, and just decided to start seeking truth. I thought I was doing that, and so many barriers for knowledge in today's society, and you think you're getting the correct information, and then you get live and live in color, you know, the knowledge that everything that you thought you was learning that was true is in fact a false.
Well, I am so happy to have you, Miss Italy. I talked a lot about you last class, so glad to be able to talk with you. If you remember last class, we talked about the assault that I experienced at Cal State LA, and that this person who I never met stood and demanded my release and put their body on the line and made sure that I was as safe as I could be. And we are becoming fast friends. And I'm grateful, Miss Italy. That person was Miss Italy. So Miss Italy is here with us, and I'm grateful that you're here with us, that we're going to be building together. And I just want you to know that you were a significant part of last class conversation. And everybody kind of knows you before you joined. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And is there anyone else who is joining for the first time, joining the community for the first time? Okay, so we're going to jump right into the review and discussion that we had. So last class, we talked about building beloved community. And this concept of beloved community was not really explicitly introduced in All About Love, but it was hinted at when Bell Hooks starts talking about how love, we're trained and socialized in this society to prioritize romantic love ahead of other kinds of love. And so she talks a lot about friendship. She talks about intentional community. She talks about shared ethics. And then we kind of expanded it and talked a lot about what Dr. King's concept of beloved community is, which is actually more than friendship. It's grounded in shared vision. And it's grounded in the idea that we can build chosen family. Does anybody want to kind of talk a little bit more about that, about what beloved community is, before we get into that discussion question? Okay, so we can just jump into the discussion question then. The discussion question, your homework, was to talk about and think about where you have or where you can build beloved community. And again, we're defining beloved community as not just friendships, but communities that are intentionally built based on shared vision, shared ethic, and the concept of chosen family. And I talked with you all about how in Black Lives Matter, in the organizing work that we do, we have built beloved community. We've built communities of care and of love. Remember, our definition of love is to nurture ourself and someone else's spiritual growth. That's what we're really doing. And so in beloved community, that sense of love is really grounded in a shared vision for the world, a shared vision where we can build a world where we prioritize communities of care. It's an abolitionist vision where we topple systems of harm and build communities of care. And what that's looked like, especially in Black Lives Matter, is I think about how I entered Black Lives Matter, which I don't think I've talked about yet. But Black Lives Matter, when it was birthed July 13th, 2013, we were conscious in building movements that was different than movements in the past, where especially women were challenged to be ourselves, be mothers, be sisters, be community makers outside and in private, and be of the movement in that space, right? So if you think about how there's a story of Joanne Robinson, I don't know if you all read that story, but Joanne Robinson, who was really the person who called the Montgomery bus boycott, she talks about how she heard of Rosa Parks' arrest. And there's a story of how she was shopping for her family. She was a professor. She was shopping for her family at the Piggly Wiggly, which is, the grocery store there in Alabama. And she was shopping for her family, grocery shopping, intending to go to cook. And she heard of Rosa Parks' arrest. And she goes home, she finishes her shopping, goes home, cooks, feeds her family, puts her children to bed, and then rushes back out to her campus. And then overnight, with her students, with some of her colleagues, mimeographs, and I know y'all going, what's a mimeograph? But if you're over 40, you know that a mimeograph is this big machine. Before they had computer copy machines that they used to crank, right? And you could build up hell of arm muscles, right? You would crank these copies, right? And you crank these copies, and she cranked these copies out, and overnight they put them on all the bus stops and told people to stop riding the bus. Well, I think about how that civil rights movement was built, where it really was women like Joanne Robinson, women like Septima Clark, women like Ella Baker, women whose names you may not know, who built the movement, but had to kind of take this invisible role. And so the people who were pushed forward were people like Dr. Martin Luther King. This is why so many young people think that it was Dr. Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement, like he was Gladys Knight and everybody else was a Pips, right? That we followed behind him, but that really wasn't the way. And I say we, but I wasn't born yet, but everyone else was following behind him. When we built Black Lives Matter, we were very intentional not to build a movement like that. We were very intentional in building a movement where we could be all of who we are at the same time. That's a concept that Kimberly Crenshaw calls intersectionality, right? We get to be all of ourselves simultaneously. When we talk about Black feminism, and why in that first class, when we talked about is feminism enough, even if it is a movement to end sexism and sexist oppression, is that enough? And we all, I think, resoundingly said no, because we're not only women. We come in with all of our intersections at the same time. And so the community that we intended to build with Black Lives Matter embraced who we were all at the same time as intersectional beings. So I entered the work as a Black single mother of, at the time, 3 very small children, right? And so we built beloved community and built a set of guiding principles that says, in order to struggle for the kind of justice that's necessary for me to be free, for Miss Italy to be free, for my children to be free, for Ebony's children to be free, and for her to be free, we have to make sure that we disrupt this notion of the nuclear family being the only form of family. We have to be expansive in our view of what family is, because if I bear the sole responsibility of mothering 3 children and also trying to build a revolutionary community, I'm not going to be able to do it. And so I need Sister Ebony, sometimes, especially on Thursday nights, to help me with pickups of my children. And that doesn't mean that I'm a bad mom. It means that, you know, it's a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist notion that we operate in the world as individuals. So instead, we build beloved community, where last night, as I was in the Taco Bell drive-through, just about to hit that order, my neighbor across the street said, "Hey, did you eat yet? Because we cooked y'all some halibut, squash, and rice." And so we told the drive-through person, never mind, and kept on going, right? And came home and ate halibut, rice, and squash, and were able to all sit at the table and eat together. I was able to talk with my children rather than feeling flustered and pushed by trying to prepare a meal or feeding them something unhealthy. And so beloved community is about intentionally building around a vision, around a shared vision, around a shared ethic, and then building community based on that. So your question was, where do you have beloved community and where can you build it? And so I'm going to stop talking and ask you to step in here. Where do you have beloved community and where can you build it? Or are you longing for beloved community? If you are longing for it, then where do you build it? How do you build it?
Hello, Dr. Abdullah. How are you doing tonight?
Good.
I would say that I had to build my beloved community because I didn't have one. And I started with my academic space, my workspace, and just talking about books and things that were related to the interest of social justice. And then those people who were interested in that book became my beloved space.
Good, good. Others, thank you, Bequita. Bijal, your hand is up. Did we lose Bijal?
I don't think sorry, I had the mute on.
Okay.
I have really struggled with this. And so I have been looking for community within radical spaces of people that are really looking for liberation and doing anti-oppression work across different issue areas. But something I've noticed is that there actually isn't any space for Indian Americans, and like physically, there's nothing beyond what's attached to temples, which is really, it doesn't work for people that are in mixed families or who are not religious. And so, and specifically Hindu. So I am looking to create a center of community and open possibly, so I'm sharing this before I'm committed and sure it will work, but I'm opening a chai shop in LA. There are no chai shops in LA, which has a ton of Indian people, and no, places that are Indian owned that have chai besides like a traditional restaurant. So the other part of it for me is building in space to have, really, I see it as a space for love and accountability. And so not only is it creating love and sharing love across, within community for our culture, but also holding ourselves accountable for how we participate in other systems of oppression. So there's a solidarity piece too.
Bijal, for me, you're so for the last week, there's been a brother named Rahul Deep Gill who's been very heavy on my spirit. Deep was part of the Black Lives Matter community and helped to build a solidarity organization. He and his family built a solidarity organization in partnership with Black Lives Matter that was really grounded in Hindu practices. And I don't know why he's been so heavy on my spirit over the last week. We lost him on January 1st. And the story that I started to tell, I didn't want to go on too long with my speaking about dinner, but Deep and his family used to do two things for us. They would take our children, they come to all the actions, and then would take our children and build this art space for our children. My children called him Uncle Deep, and he would build an art space at the back of the actions, and all the children would come to him and his wife Rachna, and they would make art. And then the other thing that he would do whenever his mother was visiting from India, she would cook. This is where I almost went. She would cook, and she would bring me these huge Tupperware containers of food. And she would say, you don't have time to cook, but you must be with your children. And so here, this is so that you can sit with your children every night at dinner. And she would feed us, especially in 2020. So you're reminding me of that. And I'm hopeful that as you build this community, there's a way that we can connect and make sure that we have beloved community together. And so I just want to acknowledge the presence of Deep Spirit, who's been hanging around all week. And I think it's not coincidental that you spoke these words tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to allow other people to go, but I just wanted to share that I was in St. Louis. I lived in St. Louis when Mike Brown and the Ferguson uprisings happened. And so I've done a lot of work in the Black liberation space, and left St. Louis because it didn't feel like there was that communal piece of solidarity work across communities in the way that I was looking for my own Indian Mexican family. And so I think that's deeply embedded in the work that I do. And I also felt like I was at a point where I couldn't do equity and inclusion work at the exclusion of myself and my family. So I'm hoping to find deeper, authentic connections in this work here.
Great, great. Well, I hope that you'll come out to some of these gatherings that we do on Wednesdays that we call rallies, that are also love fests and beloved community every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. I think you'll probably find some of what you're looking for, because it really is the building of beloved community. Eric, your hand is up.
Hello, my name's Eric. They, them pronouns. Yeah, I kind of want to yes and what Bijal was sort of speaking to, and that my experience of beloved community is like it's not all in one place, and I feel like my expectation for it to be in one place is part of that white supremacist sort of thinking of being like self-sufficient, and so there's like discomfort there, and just like trying, especially over the last couple of years, I helped form a union at one of my places of work. And so I've had beloved community there, and also helping to form an intersectionally aware committee within. But even with that, the changing, I find that it's changing a lot. And so I'm holding like compassion for that as well. So I'm still waiting for these like corners of my beloved community to sort of meet, but I don't know if that will ever happen. Still grateful that I have places and people in different realms of my life.
Yes, yes. Zara.
So I think I'm going to answer the third question you asked about, like, are you yearning for the community? And I put myself in that bucket. I run like a feminist organization. It's very low key and online. I've been trying to do that for a few years. So that's where a bunch of my effort goes. And I've been sort of wanting to build more around gender justice in the larger Muslim community and so other communities. And it's become very, very clear during the pandemic that my list to ever not coming from a disability justice lens. And so I'm kind of in the middle of pivoting. I've been able to find a lot of great community in the disability community online. Unfortunately, many of us are very, very tired a lot of the time. So the amount of effort it takes to kind of build community, we can't always sustain it. So that's something that I'm struggling with, like, you know, yearning for a community that is inclusive of my needs, but not necessarily having the energy or, you know, to build that myself. And sort of with the pandemic weighing so heavily on everyone, it's been very, very difficult to get that going. So I'm just gonna stop there.
Yeah. So I think it really is vital that we either find or build or tweak beloved communities. It's when we talk about intentionality, right? That we've talked about that the experiences that we have and the oppressions that we survive don't just come. These systems are intentionally and deliberately designed to produce the outcomes that they do. They're designed to exploit us. They're designed to, you talked about being tired, right? They're designed to wear us out. They're designed to suck out all our energy. They're designed to isolate us, and they benefit from our isolation. The last 3 chapters of the book that you all read, All About Love, talk about some things. I enjoyed reading the whole part about romantic love. That was enjoyable. But what do we bring to especially justice organizing from that? And what I bring is that we must meet intention with intention. So just as systems are designed intentionally to produce exploitative outcomes, to suck out our labor and wealth and resources and imagination and isolate us in our own corners, we have to be just as intentional in building up something that stands in opposition. And so I'm going to start with just a little bit of conversation around the first chapter that we read for this week, which was about love, romantic love, and intentionality. And so all of us have been socialized to believe that what we should be doing is falling in love. We are supposed to have this yearning for romantic love. And what Bell Hooks talks about is what falling in love looks like and feels like. And what she says is that the reason we're fed a narrative of falling in love is that then it absolves us of responsibility, right? That you have no intention. You can't help who you fall in love with, right? So you can be in love with an abuser. You can be in love with someone who is unrighteous because you just fell in love. And so, you know, the image on the left, not saying that you can't have young, intentional love, but the image on the left is of falling in love, is of this kind of overwhelming feeling that just pulled you in. But what she talks about is the much more powerful and transformative love is a love that you choose. So the image that you see on the right is my parents. I'm just going to hold them up because I think they are wonderful. And they have chosen love, right? So my parents choose love every day. And it's not that their love is unsullied. It's not that their love is always perfect. It's not that they don't sometimes quite regularly talk about, especially my mother, oh, he gets on my nerves, right? They do, but they choose love every single day. Love is a choice, right? So love is a choice when you're talking about romantic love, and love is also a choice when you're talking about other forms of love. So what I just want to kind of put that out there. What do you think that Bell Hooks means when she says that we have to choose love? We should choose love. And chosen love is the transformative kind of love. The love that we choose is the transformative kind of love. Miss Italy.
I know I didn't read the chapter yet, but could it have anything to do with making an informed decision, like a thoughtful process involved with it?
Absolutely. It's a thoughtful process. It's a deliberate choice, right? I choose to love you. My parents choose to love each other because they are building something, right? My parents built a family. My parents build a community. My parents have the same ethic, right? When we were talking about beloved community, they have the same vision and the same ethic. They choose to open their home every year for Kwanzaa and invite people in. And they choose to drum and summon in spirit, and they choose to claim their connection to Africa. This is an ethic and a choice and a vision. This is a choice. It's not just about how they feel about each other, which I remember when my mother fell in love with my Baba. So my Baba is not my biological Baba, but he's by all means my father. I remember when my mother had that giddy feeling, right? But then once that giddiness, and this is what Bell Hooks kind of talks about, that giddiness and that kind of overwhelming feeling in romantic love will inevitably kind of fall off a bit. You're not going to be giddy all the time. So you have to allow that to subside and then choose it, right? And then choose it, and or not choose it, right? Because she also talks about how, you know, there's erotic love, there's emotional attachment, and all of these things can drive you to people who are not good for you, right? Choice and choosing love means that you choose people who are good for you and advancing the vision that you want to offer with your life. Does that make sense? Anybody else want to offer what it means to choose love?
I would. Hi, everyone. I'm Maya. I wasn't able to attend last class, but I'm welcome. I'm happy to be back in this space. I think my interpretation, when Bell Hooks says, you know, what does it mean when we choose to love? I think a choice implies that there are other options. And just as you can choose to love, you can choose to hate, you can choose to be unkind or ugly. And I think what Bell Hooks is challenging us to do is, when we're in a difficult situation or when we want to go with it's easy to be caught up in the visceral reaction of like wanting to go down a direction that's not love. I think what Bell Hooks is trying to do is to get us to stop and understand that our true nature and our true being is like love. Like we need to return to that as a community, as a people, as on an individual level, which is, you know, easier said than done. But I think by making love a choice and not something that we just happen upon or fall into, you know, Hooks is very intentional with her language and her wording. I think that choice is important, and she wants us to be critical of that when we do act subconsciously or consciously make choices. She wants us to make choices from a love ethic and be on the path of love. And that was what I got from it.
Absolutely. And I think she's also saying, in fact, she does say that not everyone is deserving of your love, right? So choose love and also choose who you love, right? That you have a love ethic, but those who are allowed in your intimate space, that's a choice, right? You don't have to allow everyone in your intimate space. I want to, is there anybody else who wants to hop in on love as a choice?
Yeah, hi, it's Ryan. I'd love to jump in.
Sure,
Um,
Brian.
I'm on Tonga land in Los Angeles, and I'm in a recovery program for trauma and some other things. And that's my beloved community. And it's anonymous, so it's actually beautiful. I don't know people's last names even. It's just their initials. And for me, like choosing love is boundaries, it's understanding that if someone violates a clear boundary, I don't have to participate with them. And even if they're my blood, that I can take a break and create my own space separate from them. And so I like how love is active and it's not a passive thing that we just fall into like it's a movie.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to jump to the chapter about love is healing. And I'm hoping Ebony will help me a little bit. On Monday, we participated in the Black Mama Bailout. So every year for the last 5 years, right around Mother's Day, we've been engaging in Black Mama Bailout. It's the idea that no one deserves to be living in cages. People should not be in cages, and especially mamas shouldn't be in cages. And so we were talking about love is healing, and I just wanted to play a little bit of a video for you from that day. Don't worry, Ebony, I don't have, I was trying to find your video, but I couldn't. So I want to play a little bit of, a little bit of what that was, of what Black Mama Bailout was. I think I got it, I do. This works. Huh, how is it? Can you all see anything on that screen? Can you all see this?
Now we
Yeah.
can. We can see the clip now.
Okay.
Sam is a mother of 4 and SoCal native.
In March of this year, I was arrested when housing insecurity made me unable to report for probation. Instead of being given resources for my family and I to be safe and well, I was given handcuffs in front of my 3-year-old daughter.
She could have spent Mother's Day in a jail cell, but 3 weeks ago, nonprofit SC Justice Group paid for her bail.
SC Justice Group has changed my life by bailing me out. They spent $50,000 straight to the jail and bailed me out and gave me a second chance at life, basically.
Since then, Sam says she has a job, housing, and is working on getting her children back. She's also joining several organizations urging the LA County Board of Supervisors to fully fund alternatives to incarceration.
If I was in custody, there would have been a completely different outcome to my story and my case.
We're asking for about $237 million to go to 3,600 mental health beds for resources to fully fund mental health services, as well as a pretrial services agency.
Among the county's measures for alternatives to incarceration is a new Justice Care and Opportunities Department, an effort led by Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. Existing services will fall under it, and funding as restructuring takes place is being assessed. Kuehl told Eyewitness News in part, that process, which is underway but not yet complete, ensures that we are not duplicating.
So I wanted to uplift that example and hope that Sister Ebony would share a little bit about how that is love is healing and what that experience was like for you. Ebony was one of the speakers on Monday. Can you share a little bit, Ebony? And I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I guess I would have been more loving to tell you that I planned to call on you.
Sure. Yes, love is healing, and that experience, just knowing the work that SC Justice Group and its partners, which includes BLMLA also, really not only do they bail women out, but they wait however many hours it takes at the jail to receive each mama and make sure that they get a hot, good meal somewhere nice, and come with the necessities and a ride to where, a safe, either their home or a safe new place where they can live, like a new way of life and other transitional housing that has resources. And just some of the other speakers were also sharing who were bailed out through this program, shared how they get a sisterhood and like an SE sister who will check on them daily, and not in like a punitive probation officer kind of way, but just to make sure that they have what they need for their families and themselves each day, and come with them to court and just really be community. And it was really, really beautiful to see and to be a part of such a truly beloved community, that could really set the tone and model for what we all can do and what this government needs to do and society needs to do until people are no longer in cages anywhere. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. I hope I answered.
You did, and I'm wondering if you want to share a little bit about what you said and if you want to, I'm not going to push you, but if you want to speak from your own perspective.
I wasn't prepared, I'm sorry.
Okay. Can I share a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So I thought Ebony spoke from her own perspective, and I thought she did a really good job of contrasting what we can build from what is. That these systems are systems that are the opposite of love. These systems, jails and prisons, are the opposite of love, right? That they intend to break up families. You heard the sister talking about what it means. She, if you heard more of her speaking, she talked about what it meant that she was handcuffed in front of, I think, her 3-year-old child, and that the system wouldn't even allow her to call her oldest child, who was 20, to come get her youngest child, who was 3. Instead, they took this screaming 3-year-old baby and placed this baby with a family, with strangers, with a family that this baby didn't know, and what kind of trauma that brought to her child. And that it's going to take not just the love that she received that bailed her out and that's now checking on her and trying to provide her with resources and the job that she now has, but it's going to take many, many years of love, intense love, to heal that wound that her 3-year-old child now experienced, right? And so when we talk about love as healing, we're talking about love as healing in terms of our interpersonal relationships. We're talking about love as healing, reminding ourselves that this idea of individualism is both a falsehood and an intentional creation of capitalism that isolates us one from another, so that nobody's thinking about bailing this mama out, so that nobody's thinking about how do we wrap our arms around this 3-year-old child, so that nobody's thinking about what it means when I was dragged out last week and making sure that I got home to my children. So building beloved community is about disrupting the systems of harm that exist in everyday life, and particularly prey upon and harm Black women in particular. And so when we choose to love, we are also building new systems that disrupt the old ones. Does that make sense to y'all? Any other thoughts on that?
Can I just add one more thing? Thank you for sharing more, Dr. Abdullah. But one thing that I shared as a Black mama who also experienced incarceration was that the stark contrast is the whole experience is designed to make you feel dehumanized and subhuman. And I even shared how I had a guard tell me one time that, you know, because I demanded that he respect my humanity. And I said it in those words. And he said, "You're not human, you're an inmate," in those words. And so the experience is really, really designed to make you lose your sense of self-worth, or that you deserve to be treated like an animal. And so the stark contrast is just to be in beloved community where that doesn't happen, where you're poured into instead of treated like that. And one other thing I shared also was witnessing that there are packages of food in prisons, well, at least the federal prison I was in, that have big labels on them that say not for human consumption. So what kind of message does that send to inmates or people who are experiencing incarceration, is what I like to say, as they're preparing this food for themselves and their, you know, fellow cohabitants. So yeah, thank you, Dr. Abdullah.
Thank you, Ebony. Thank you, Ebony. So we have wrapped up all about love. And one of the things that we said at the start of this journey is that there are some things. I think Bell Hooks is one of the most brilliant minds to ever walk the face of this earth. She's an incredible spirit. And she was also a human being. And that means that what we've read is, for me, profoundly impactful and not something that we just have to swallow. We can grapple with some of those ideas. And so I want to, as we wrap up this reading, think about the pieces that we embrace, and then also think about the pieces that we want to challenge. So I want to invite you, and I'm not going to be able to see because I'm going to be typing as, oh, can I do this? I think I can do this. Uh-oh, maybe I can't. Can you all see the screen still? There we go.
Yes.
Okay. I'm hoping that I can type as we talk. I'd like us to talk about, let's see, maybe if I end the show, I can do this. Okay. Yeah, let's do it this way. I want us to talk about the things from Bell Hooks, from All About Love, that were profoundly important and that sit with us. And we're going to come up with at least 3 of those. And then I also want us to talk about the things that we want to grapple with, that we want to challenge. So with that, what are some of the things that were really important for you? What are you thinking about differently? And it doesn't have to be from just this set of readings. It's anything that you've read over the last 3 weeks. Am I the only one who has a bunch of stuff?
Caitlin has her hand up, her hand up, sorry. So I'm not sure if you can't see it because I know that you said that.
Yes, go ahead, Caitlin.
That's great. Thank you so much. In the chapter on greed, Dr. Hooks says young progressives committed to social justice who had found it easy to maintain radical politics when they were living on the edge, on the outside, did not want to do the hard work of changing and reorganizing our existing system in ways that would affirm the values of peace and love, or democracy and justice. They fell into despair, and that despair made capitulation to the existing social order the only place of comfort. And from that, I take just the significance of what you were just talking about, which is building beloved community around that shared vision of love as a healing force so powerful enough that it can support us to really build new systems.
The importance of building new systems. Who else? Thank you, Caitlin.
Sterling.
Okay, go ahead. Thanks for reading them out to me.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Sterling calling in from Chippewa land up here in the Northwest. And I kind of have two things kind of stuck out to me. The first being, and they both came from this last section that we read. The first being when, Bell Hooks was referencing grief. And at one point, Bell Hooks mentioned our mourning, our letting ourselves grieve over the loss of loved ones is an expression of our commitment, a form of communication and communion. Love invites us to grieve. We honor their presence by naming the legacies they leave us. And that really stuck out to me and was very impactful as a person who, is still grieving the loss of various family members and friends. So that was impactful and something that I really loved. And then something that I guess I would challenge, or perhaps maybe it's not even really a challenge, it's more like maybe it's just a question, was around something that Bell Hooks mentioned on page 199 related to, again, death. And the passage goes, "There is no one among us who is a stranger to death. Our first home in the womb is also a grave where we await the coming of life. Our first experience of living is a moment of resurrection, of movement out of the shadows and into the light," which I think is very beautiful and very profound in a lot of ways. However, I guess the part that I would challenge or, perhaps pose as a question is, our first home in the womb is also a grave. I've never really thought about that. And something kind of struck me a little strange to think that we're considering, the birthplace of where life originates as to be that, but that was just my thought.
Great, great. Others, what do you embrace and what do you challenge?
Hello, I wanted to offer up a challenge. I would say just like Bell Hooks seem to have an awareness of the gender binary and how it's perpetuated in different forms and throughout systems, and even like newly emergent systems will still mimic gender norms from cis heteronormativity. And I would love, I would love to see more inclusive language and a little bit more space left with that acknowledgement that there might be more that is left to be understood. Because I know you can't necessarily speak from a place that you don't have experience of personally, but you can sort of leave the door open or leave an extra seat, so to speak. And I just want to quickly uplift vision, because Bell Hooks also talks about how it's important to not only disparage and agitate, but also spend some of that energy on vision, because that's also important.
Yes, I'm looking at time. I would also add, in terms of embracing, I love in this last set of readings, the emphasis on life. She says that we're a society that celebrates and glorifies death, and we should do more to celebrate and glorify life. And I think that that's absolutely right. The celebration of life. And I think that's tied to that point about vision. Anybody else?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So something that I will take away, oh, that's annoying. Something that I will take away from this book is her definition of love, and particularly in terms of parenting, where she kind of, she does all that nuanced explanation of care is not the same as love. Care is a component of love, but they sometimes get collapsed into each other. And I feel like I personally am kind of at a transitional moment in my parenting journey. My kids are still very young, and I feel like those early years, those infant to toddler years, are just so defined by care. It's all care all the time. But my kids are starting to get a little bit older and a little bit more independent. So then how do I love them? How does that shift from just caring, changing diapers and feeding them and all that stuff to something deeper as they grow into individuals? So that's something I will take away. And then as a challenge, from the greed chapter, and I'm not sure if I can fully articulate this, but I struggled with, it's not that anything that she said in that chapter was wrong per se. I just felt that there was such an emphasis on individual expressions of greed that did not consider the context, the larger systems of oppression that the individuals are caught within, or how the state often creates situations that lead to individual choices that may be less than ideal. But I struggled with that chapter because it felt like a lot of the blame was discussed in terms of individuals, when I think a lot of the root causes go back to systems and state oppression.
I'm going to offer this last one in terms of a challenge. I also saw her kind of bound up in her own experiences, and we all are, right? So some of the conversation around parenting and the ways in which she's loved, and I really love the way that she speaks from her own experiences. And I also think that not being a parent who has children in the home, there was, and maybe I'm building in too many of my own experiences, but I shared, like last week and this week too have been pretty tough for me. But my oldest daughter came home from college on Saturday, and some of those wounds and challenges that I've experienced in my life are almost immediately healed when I hug her. And I think that that's a result, I feel that as a result of being a single mother who's raised my 3 children to be my teammates, not just my children, but my teammates. So I have a different kind of love with my children that I don't think that anyone who, maybe even if they're not a single mom, really experiences. So I would say another challenge that maybe we all have, not just Bell Hooks has, is being limited in our view to our own set of experiences. We're right at time, and I want to introduce the next book that we're going to be reading. So we are starting on Teaching to Transgress next week. And I love this as a next book because we're moving from love ethic to how do we use that love to challenge the world in which we live and teach others to challenge the world in which we live. And so that's what we're moving to for next week. I want you to think about for next week how you transgress, what transgressions, what righteous transgressions have you made in your own life? And I want us to start the conversation next week with that. Does that work for everybody?
Absolutely.
Great. Any last thoughts, closing thoughts before we hop off? All right, well, have a great week. And I put in the chat that there's a couple of things that we invite you to come to this Sunday. If you are free, please come to the Black Lives Matter General Organizing Meeting. Those of you who are yearning for beloved community, I think you might find some there. And then on Wednesdays is the rally and protest that we talked about every Wednesday at 4 o'clock at 1313 West 8th Street. So you're always welcome there as well. This will probably be the only Black Lives Matter General Organizing Meeting of our term. So if you can make it out on Sunday, please come. There'll be food, there'll be artistic expression, and there'll be a lot of great folks. So have a great week, and I hope to see you next Thursday, God willing.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.